your normal productivity levels you're used to working on, say on a construction site, will be a lot lower than what you would normally have on a private sector job. In saying that, one of the real benefits of doing work for government is that it does really balance up your customer portfolio. So it allows a level of consistency in the work you get. So government always spends money, it's always pretty consistent, it comes around year on year. So one of the things we really encourage people to do is to have a balance of private sector work, but also government work as well. So as we've seen particularly through COVID-19, it was a real push around stimulus within the private sector around infrastructure, and we'll talk a little bit about that. On the flip side though, we've also seen a significant spend within the private sector construction world, particularly around new build. So some of these decisions you're going to make around whether you want to pursue government work has to be balanced around the things you've got going in your wider business. What we'll talk a little bit about today is it's just a little bit of an update around what's happening in our market. We're going to talk a little bit about how government agencies procure, so understanding a little bit of the nuances around why things go to tender, how I can avoid the tender box. I want to talk a little bit around specific opportunities. So there's some really, really good opportunities with likes of Kahurangi Malcolm, which is Housing New Zealand, and the likes of New Zealand Transport Agency, about where you can really focus in on and maybe start to look at that as an entry point if you're looking to win work in the government sector. One of the things I want to talk to you a little bit about, and I imagine most of you have some success within the sectors you're working in, but you're doing something that's creating a very good and strong emotional bond with your customers. So all of these customers, these government clients, work on the same premise as your private sector clients. You have a high level of trust, you deliver on your promises. So that's no different. So I want to talk a little bit about how do we create positive bias? How do we win government work without going to tender? All right, let's just talk a little bit about some construction market observations. And back in February, the government at the time announced this New Zealand upgrade program. And believe it or not, it wasn't actually there to be COVID stimulus, but it was there to provide a level of certainty to the New Zealand construction sector about what was going on in the market. In essence, it was around about $7 billion of investment on some major capital works. I think what's important about this is that nearly $5 billion of this spend is hubbed around what they call the Golden Triangle, which is essentially the Waikato, the Bay of Plenty, Auckland, and the far north. So out of that sort of roughly $7 billion of spend, it was predominantly around $5 billion, or over $5 billion hubbed around there. And about $1 billion in the Wellington region, and unfortunately, the South Island only got $250 million. But we'll talk a little bit about how the government intends to balance that out. So this is predominantly focused around infrastructure capital projects. So that's new build designs with roading, water and rail being the key focus points. And the key buying agencies were Auckland Transport, New Zealand Transport Agency, Waka Kotahi and Kiwi Rail. So that was when people talk about the New Zealand upgrade program, that's what they were talking about. But in conjunction with this, the government also started to stimulate other agencies to actually spend money. So, for example, we had, let's just talk about the Provincial Growth Fund. We'll talk a little bit about that later, but in essence, what it was looking to do is provide funding outside those large urban areas, particularly Auckland. So you saw money being spent in the far north and the Hawke's Bay, on the west coast of the South Island. So there was roughly about $2.8 billion of funding made available to the regions. And it was predominantly through things like infrastructure upgrades or tourism. Marae upgrades was part of that program as well. And a lot of that was funded either through things like local council or local EB agencies as well. And then you had Kahurangi Malcolm. It's a very interesting organisation. It's this old Housing New Zealand. They have on average around about $2 billion a year they're spending for the next 10 years. So significant investment in terms of new homes, 8,000 new homes, and also the maintenance of their assets as well. And there's some really good entry points with Kahurangi Malcolm. Ministry of Education as well, so we still continue to see the government invest within their schools, and also Board of Trustees investing in their assets as well in the Ministry of Health. What we're also seeing is a real focus on water. As some of you may be aware, 2 years ago, there was an incident in Havelock North in the Hawke's Bay in which there was a water poisoning situation, and unfortunately, I think 4 people were passed away as a result of associated issues with that water poisoning. That's created a real level of interest around how government funds capital infrastructure. And Department of Internal Affairs, which is the department that runs the local councils, is now currently looking at how they can amalgamate and get local councils to deliver water infrastructure in a better way. So there's also discussions around how do they provide central government funding, and the numbers that are coming out are in the vicinity of $2-3 billion of potential spend from central government within water. So that's just not in terms of things like reticulation, which is the pipe where it could be pumps, it could be electrical, mechanical upgrades, a whole lot of new water retaining structures, civil works and so forth. So again, we're going to see a real influx of investment in the water space in the coming years. I suppose what we're seeing, if I take Auckland as an example, through the stimulus provided by the New Zealand Upgrade Program and just business as usual, we're probably looking at an additional $500 million a year being spent in infrastructure in Auckland. So the demand for services within the space is significant. It's a real challenge now to find people on the ground to deliver these projects. And balancing that with what we're seeing within the market in terms of residential spend, with people spending more money on their houses because they can't travel, we're almost seeing the perfect storm around availability of resources to deliver projects. So I suppose in essence, what I'm emphasizing here is your value proposition, if you're in this game, does not need to be cheap. If you can deliver projects of a high level, then people are looking for you to commit that resource and be available to deliver those projects. What I want to talk a little bit about is the market, and what we talk about is prime contractors, particularly in infrastructure. And the reason I'm showing this is there's some of the entry level points that you may find to participate within these markets is via the primes. So you might find yourself subcontracting to say a Higgins or a Downer or so forth like that. Now that's a very legitimate and good strategy around if you want to participate in this market. And I know some of the work that Kahurangi and the team at Amotai are doing is about connecting businesses to these primes in order for people to participate in some of these projects that I've just talked about now. What are some of the benefits of working for a prime? Firstly, they normally make available most of their health and safety, environmental quality systems available. They support you around some of the commercial activities. In my background, I was with Downers for a number of years, and that's how we used to support our subcontractors. Typically for some of these construction activities, you might find that a prime only self-performs maybe 20 or 30% of the total work. So they're quite heavily reliant on their subcontractor base to deliver this work. And this has become even more acute now. So, you know, especially in the vertical build space, in the commercial sector, you know, we're seeing a decline, you know, anecdotally a decline in investment, mainly because there was heavy emphasis around property, like commercial property, office blocks, and also hotels. So we're not seeing that level of investment, but we're seeing equivalent investment within the education and also within DHPs or district health boards in terms of hospital infrastructure. There was a strong reliance, particularly on some of the finishing trades. So I talk about painting and final fit out with imported labour. Some of you guys will be aware of that. So there's now real opportunities in that space for businesses to step into that breach. So again, I'm just showing you this mainly so you get a sense of who's in the market. I spoke to Kahurangi, we'll make these slides available for you as well. If you want to find out a little more, there's this great website called ANZ IP, Infrastructure Pipeline. It's a great way to just to get on there and have a look at what is in the market, particularly around us in New Zealand. I think what it does highlight though is these are the major projects. It doesn't get all the nitty gritty around what's been spent by your local councils. And also what it fails to do is to talk about maintenance. Now everyone gets really excited about capital works programs. Yeah, let's build a big railway, let's do this and that. But maintenance is actually a really great opportunity for our Māori and Pacifica businesses. It's a really good way or entry level point, mainly for a couple of reasons. Firstly, they generally are long-term contracts that could be up to 10 years. So for example, when I was with Downers, we had a number of projects, maintenance contracts in the road network where we engaged local businesses to do vegetation control, so curbside mowing, etc. And it allowed these businesses to grow and develop over a period of time, pay for the capital cost of their assets that they bought, and actually move into different things. So maintenance is something that's not mentioned here, but is really, really important. Where the good maintenance contracts? Well, roading's definitely one to think about. Things like FM, facilities maintenance. So every government agency that owns a building generally will have some form of facilities maintenance contracts, and that's a great opportunity around building trades and so forth like that. Open space management. So we talk about every park, every park and reserve needs some form of maintenance. So that's cutting the lawns, looking after the toilets, etc., etc. What else? Water maintenance is another thing. So reticulation-based maintenance, maintenance of water treatment plants, electrical also. So these are just some things to think about when you go on this journey around what opportunities you might want to chase. Okay, let's talk around how government agencies buy. And I think let's just talk a little bit about NovaPay. I always use this as a really good example. For those who are not familiar, this is a piece of software that was put out by the Ministry of Education in 2012. It was designed to provide payroll services for over 100,000 teachers and support staff. And the initial cost of it was about $182 million over 10 years with that initial setup and so forth like that. So this is a really good example of a procurement gone really badly. When they started implementing the payroll system, over 8,000 teachers were not even getting paid. And 90% of schools were impacted by that, so it was quite significant. The government actually had to tip in a whole lot of additional money. I think it's about $45 million of additional money on it. And I believe it's still not right at the moment. Actually, I'll just join our school board of trustees. I'll tell you in a couple of weeks whether it's working or not. Look, I think why this is important is because if you used to work into the private sector organisations, they can be very focused on delivery to their customer and to reaching some sort of financial objective. So those are generally for private sector customers, the two key drivers. What you're going to find when you start working with government agencies is that they have external pressures on them as well. So public relations, following process, following rules. So some of the decisions that government agencies may make may be based on things that are probably not what would be considered normal business practice, but on around how they follow the rules or how they mitigate risk around things like public relations and so forth like that. And so I always bring up a little slide, Dale Carnegie. I think when you start to get your head in this game is when you're dealing with people, remember you're not dealing with creatures of logic, but creatures of emotion. And we'll talk a little bit about how that manifests itself in terms of them selecting you to be the preferred supplier. So let's talk about what happens in a procurement. Now, poor old government agency person sitting there in their office has to go through quite a process to put anything to market. And Kahurangi knows this, but she works for Amotai and was part of Auckland Council. But generally things are very well planned and forecast. So to procure something of significance, when I say significance, more than say $500,000, can take up to 6 months of pre-planning before they can even put something to market. It's generally linked to a business case, so they have to go and justify the spending of that money to the wider community, so it's just part of the process. There's generally quite a high level of profile around it, so there will be levels of scrutiny, lots of people with clipboards, looking over their shoulder, making sure it is all picked off. Generally, things they're procuring have a limited or specialist market. So within the construction sector, it could be very limited, high risk, and generally high procurement and bid costs as well. So typically for a government agency to put a very simple tender to market is a minimum probably costs them $20,000 to $30,000. So all this takes time. And we'll talk a little bit about why it's important potentially for government agencies to sole source you or give you work direct. Maybe because the challenge a lot of government agencies have, believe it or not, and for those people that are used to working in the revenue generating business, is it's really hard to spend the money. And in particular, we've seen this with this large influx of money that's coming through the New Zealand Upgrade Program and other stimulus packages and like. So this is a little bit about the traditional process of a tender process. So What they may do is they may put a request for information out to market. So they're kind of fishing. They might go, actually, we're really interested in understanding what the market capability is for this particular outcome. And then they might go, actually, we'll go through an expression of interest. So that's allowing them to go, okay, let's assess the supply competency. And those things they might look at as your track record and relevant experience. So what projects have you worked on in the past? So if you're looking at potentially, let's say, a school project, what schools have you done? How many schools have you worked on? What's the capability of your team? That might be within an expression of interest. And then we may find that they might go to looking at the solution competency, which they may ask the question around, okay, describe how you might construct that particular process, that particular structure. Okay, what are the systems and processes you have in place? So you can see here, it can be quite a protracted, long-winded process. One of the advantages of subbing to a prime, so let's say we were bidding for a piece of work and we were subcontracting like a downer for one of the New Zealand upgrade programs, for example, is they're going to go through that process for you. And they may ask you some information along the way that they may use within their tenders. So they might, one of the legitimate ways to win some of this work is to jump off the back of one of the tenders that one of the primes is putting in place. But what we advocate for, particularly for some of our smaller business and particularly in professional services, is how do we negotiate work direct? And I'll talk a little bit about it. But if you're, let's just get in there now. So one of the things we look at is how do we tender? And so that's obviously, we look at things like unsolicited project and negotiated work. So here's our business here, we're trying to win this piece of work. We often think that all we have to do is put in a tender, but actually there's other opportunities as well. So how does an organisation like a government agency allow you to be sole source? Well, a lot of government agencies, and we're seeing this within some of the councils, actually have what's called delegated financial authority. So the ability to be able to award contracts to a certain value, as long as you meet a level of competency and you're capable. So we're working with one particular council at the moment. They've got about $10 million worth of footpath jobs. So they know that within their community they work, that actually there's probably 6 or 7 competency providers that can do that. Now, rather than spending a whole lot of money going through some form of tender process that may preclude people because they're not prepared to bid because of the costs and the compliance, what they're looking for now is to package some of these components up and issue packages of work between $100,000 and $200,000 of footpath activity. That doesn't mean there's not going to be any due diligence intention within that contract. They're going to use historic rates around the square metre rates for previous footpaths, so it's not an opportunity to gouge the client. They'll be using that as commercial tension. But the real opportunity is if you do that piece of work well, then they're going to continue to award work. So it becomes a real high trust environment. So these are the things that you need to start thinking about when you start working with local agencies in particular, is how do I get to a point where I can negotiate some of the work? How do things come to market? So how do they evaluate? So one of the common traits, and this is pretty historic, is this lowest price conforming one. So whoever has the lowest price wins. And that's duty for low risk, low value sort of contracts. So it might be something like an aggregate supply or a particular activity that is replicated a lot. Maybe footpaths could be an example of that. We have this thing called weighted attributes. So that's a typical for some of the largest contracts where in essence they look at what is the price you put forward and actually what is the value of the attributes. So they might look at things like track record, relevant experience, the capability of your team, systems and processes. And that might be a weighted attribute. And we're seeing now a real shift away from things that are heavy price driven. So we might say 70% price, 70% attributes, 30% price. So clients are now becoming more discerning around making sure they can help select organisations that give them the best levels of service and value for money. This thing called Brooks Law, and this is something that happens in professional services a lot, where essentially an organisation will choose someone on the basis of attributes, and in essence then negotiate the rates afterwards. And then we're seeing sole source or direct appointment. And in New Zealand, we're pretty lucky. A lot of agencies have up to $100,000 and even up to $500,000 to sole source or direct appoint. So that's what I'm talking about before. If you put a compelling case together, why can't we dish out those packages of work to other providers on a direct waterway. Australia's a little less generous, but New Zealand's very lucky. And there's a couple of things around open tenders. So when something comes to market, it goes to everyone, or closed invited. That's when you have selected suppliers being able to participate. So just some ideas or thoughts of how things might come to market or evaluation methods. Let's just talk a little about some specific opportunity, and let's just talk a little bit about compliance. There's some really good ones at the moment. Kāinga Ora are really progressive in their thinking around engaging with Māori business, and maybe Kahurangi will talk a little bit about it. It's a fantastic group of people. They're really trying to advocate hard and engage with Māori and Pacifica businesses, so that's really exciting. There's a regional development panel. It's an open panel for building trade, so that's outside of Auckland and Wellington. There's some compliance-based stuff in there, but in essence, what they're looking for is local businesses to deliver local projects. I think what's interesting with Kāinga Ora in particular, and this from a Māori outcomes perspective, is the strong emphasis around Papa Kāinga housing and actually working really closely together with iwi. So we're seeing a lot of more joint development opportunities through Kāinga Ora. So they're not going to deliver their portfolio of housing without support from wider support from the community which they live. So some really progressive thinking. I think what Kahu will do is she's a great avenue for you to connect into Kāinga Ora. So she might talk a little bit about that afterwards. New Zealand Transport Agency. So just so everyone understands a little bit, for every time we buy some fuel at the bowser, what we see is a small proportion of that goes to central government to support our wider roading and transport infrastructure. That then gets distributed back to local councils to deliver roading assets. In order to deliver most of those roading assets for council organisations, then you need to be NZTA pre-qualified. Okay? So what that means is that there's a level of scrutiny required around that, and I'll talk a little bit about it. But the key criteria is around routine and minor works, bridge construction and surfacing. So we're having discussions with Māori business based in the regions, won't go into detail, who's been subbing for one of the primes for a number of years, does great work, and now going through the pre-qualification process himself, so he can work directly with some of the clients that he was previously subbing for via the prime. Just something to be aware of. You're trying to maintain a relationship with the prime. You don't want to burn that bridge. But what it means is that we can, going through this process, we can help him have a seat at the top table and actually work with that client directly. Let's just talk about PGF. So I talked a little bit about it before, but one of the challenges with the New Zealand Upgrade Program was that it really did focus spend in the urban regions, and particularly we saw in Auckland over $5 billion in the Golden Triangle. And the PGF is designed specifically around trying to invest back into the communities with the outside of those core regions. So if I give you some examples, we're working with a couple of councils at the moment. You guys might be familiar with them. I won't mention them by name, but some of them have had significant investment. So one of our councils had $70 million of additional funding given to them. Now, they only have a capital works budget of $50 million. So in essence, it's doubled it then and then some. So one of their real challenges around is how do they spend that money and how do they deliver those projects? So this is a real issue for some of the organisations that have been given money by the PGF. So that really does allow, I think, an opportunity for you as a business to go and have those discussions with those people that have been given some money around and what packages of work could you potentially help out with. The great thing is if you jump on the website, the PGF website, there's an Excel spreadsheet on there that details out where all that money went. So you can see within your regions, you're sitting in exactly where the money's gone. And I know from experience, this is a real challenge for some of these organisations around spending that money. So look out for the PGF stuff. It's a great opportunity particularly for Māori and Pacifica businesses. Ministry of Education, I'll talk a little bit about this, and I'm just learning a little bit more about how this works as well. But one of the things I think is really important is that if, particularly in the regions, the relationship with your local schools is key. Board of Trustees have quite a level of discretion around the money they spend on capital infrastructure within their school environment. Stuff that can be worked directly with the Board of Trustees via their project managers. I'm uncertain about the Delegated Financial Authority. look, I just have a guess. I just joined the board of trustees a couple of weeks ago for our school, and what's interesting is the money we're spending is in the vicinity of $500,000 easy, and we're making that discretionary call as a board of trustees on the basis of the information there. So again, having relationships with your local school is really important, and particularly if you were a good student and teachers know you, that is a really good opportunity there. The larger stuff, the new school will always go to market, but I think, having that relationship with your local school and your local Ministry of Education infrastructure advisors is really key. So just wanted to give you some examples of things you can think about straight away. Obviously, kind of order the panel there, NZTA, PGF funding via your councils or your local agencies, and Ministry of Education. These are all great entry points for any business that's looking to start down this journey. Let's talk a little bit about compliance. So this tends to be the challenge. So we work with a number of businesses, and I think what compliance is not about competence, because actually most of you guys are reasonably competent to do the work. All we're doing is backfilling the paperwork to show a bureaucracy that you can do what you need to do. So for majority of those contracts above, require you to have these things in place: health and safety system, environmental management, quality management. What they're often looking for is personnel capability. So that's things like, what qualifications do my staff have? So if you're in a building trade, are we licensed building practitioners? Do we have, if we're in a civil infrastructure trade, do I have guys that are qualified with site safe or some level of basic site infrastructure capability? I think what's really interesting at the moment, this is something to note down, is that the government have free fees on a lot of this stuff. So things that you were normally paying for in terms of civil trades, building trades, even you can do a QS qualification through Open Polytech, and it's free. So we've never seen better investment in our capability within our industry than now. So if you're looking at upskilling your team, get on that website, get on some of that BCITO, get on the Connexus, which are all the ITOs, have a sniff around, talk to those guys and say, what can I get for free? Don't be, just do it and say, what can I get for free? And they'll tell you, because you shouldn't be paying fees for a lot of stuff that our people are doing. So this is really important. There's never been a better time to upskill your team. And a lot of the things around the Open Polytech, for example, can be done after hours and the weekend. So if you've got a motivated people, yourself, you can get a QS qualification, all that sort of stuff. The other thing is around track record and relevant experience. So it's just a dossier of the projects you've worked on in the past. And those are all things that are important for particularly for giving you that level of, or giving your client a sense that you're competent and capable of doing things. One thing we'll just touch on around health and safety systems of things like impact pre-qualification. So impact is a tool essentially that allows you to input data around the capability of your team, and actually requires you to maintain things like your health and safety statistics. So how many hours you've worked, have you had any miss incidents or lost time injuries, etc., like that. That's becoming more and more popular. There's a high level of cost to that. So something to think about really carefully around whether you want to invest. But I think maybe in a couple of weeks we might have a solution around that. We might be able to share a little bit around how we move forward on that. All right, let's keep moving. Look, let's talk about creating positive bias. And I really hope one day I work with a lot of corporate organisations, and this is a question I always ask, and I'm hopeful that one day I'll work with a Māori business and there'll be someone in the room who has this problem. So what do middle-aged men buy Porsches? You gotta remember that I work with corporate guys, and a lot of them, or not a lot of them, some of them do have Porsches, but if I work with the Māori Pacific business and I had this problem, it'd be fantastic. We'll drive around Porsches, awesome. So what happens is, in a lot of cases, and it goes back to that word of emotion, is that if you were to ask someone, they'll go, well, it's midlife crisis, I'm trying to look good again, I'm having that moment in my life where I'm not as good as I looked, and maybe I'm, unfortunately gone through my first, maybe second marriage, and I'm out and I tried again. But actually, if we think about it, if we would ask that person directly, they'll say, well, it's a great piece of engineering. It goes from 0 to 100 in X amount of time. It's got leather seats, etc., etc. The important thing around this question is that people make decisions based on emotion, and they rationalize after the fact. So let's go through that again. We make decisions based on emotion, and we rationalize after the fact. So if we go back to that NovaPay example I gave you around If you're the next person to buy the next IT system out of government, your emotions will be on overdrive. You just don't want to be the next overpay. So we'll talk a little bit about the science on that and why that is important for us when they're trying to convince organizations that they should do business first. Now, our brain's made up of two parts. One is the system 2, which is the inner part of our brain. It's our amygdala. So that's kind of our fight or flight mode. And we make decisions very instinctively and we make decisions very emotively, even though we try not to. Yeah, you can ask my wife this. I'm pretty sure she would say we do. And it's basically 50% of all managerial decisions made with the inner part of our brain. So fast and instinctual. And we often use previous experiences we had as a way of vetting it. So if we've had a negative experience in the past, we'll be more susceptible to make a decision on using the inner part of our brain. It's not till we slow down and actually start thinking about it do we start using the outer part of our brain and start to rationalize things. So what does this mean? What does this mean practically? So here's a typical tender. Hopefully you guys can see this. So here we go. We ask things like track record, relevant experience, personnel, systems, process, price, all very rational. But sitting underneath this from a buyer's perspective are all these emotive things. Like, well, you're a small Māori business. Oh, you've never done business with us before. You're not a corporate. You've never worked on something this size. So even though we may present something very rational, the emotional things will actually drive some of that decision making, particularly if we start working with organizations that are naturally conservative, like bureaucracies, like government agencies. So something just to think about a little bit about how we think about things and actually the importance of building relationships with clients so that we overcome this. Talk a little bit about that soon. So we did a little bit of research on this, and what we found is that for all the tenders that we've won, this is over 7 years, we've done hundreds and hundreds of them, all our successful tenderers had done some form of pre-position. So they'd actually built the relationship with the client and got over those emotional issues well and truly before the tender came to market or before they put in the quote. 81% of all lost tenders, our customer had done those sort of project-specific pre-position with the client. So here's the golden rule, team. If we see an opportunity on a tender website and we've done no pre-positioning at all, the answer is no. We're not going to bid it because your likelihood of winning is, as you can see here, next to nothing. Okay? Government agencies are unlikely to source or give organisations opportunities if they haven't met or experienced them in the past. It's a really key point. Would be better to spend that money and time in building the relationships informally rather than going through a full tender process. So I will talk a little bit about how do we have a relationship with a customer. And in particular, I work with engineers, and I'm an engineer, so I'm a bit on the spectrum. So we try and have a relationship like a patient-doctor. So when we're talking about, again, here's our gentleman in the nice purple sweater there. Here's our client. Here's us, the engineer, looking like a doctor. And we're talking about a construction project, and we're going, okay, what are the key challenges? What are the issues? We're trying to find out what are the big issues are. And more than likely, you'll find that most of the issues are not technical at all. We find that for construction activities, particularly for public sector organisations, it's things like, are we going to block the school off if we put the footpath there? Are we going to get complaints from the mums dropping the kids off? So I'm assuming mums, that's terrible. If we shut down that, put a footpath there, does that shut that shop down? Am I likely to get in trouble because I didn't follow the right process? So all these things, even though we know how to build a footpath, all these other peripheral things are often the things that drive or keep a high level of anxiety around our client organisation. Are you going to deliver on budget? Are you going to surprise me with a variation or something that's going to come out of the blue? So we talk about things like a thing called a trusted advisor. So what we're trying to do before we lean or we start to put in tenders or RFQs is building that level of trust and understanding what's going on. All right, so here's some practical things around becoming a trusted advisor. So how do we build up a picture of our client organisation such that we know what the challenges are? Okay, I'll fly through these here. So one of the things you can do is start to build up your pipeline. So what opportunities are coming to market? And even for a small business like ours, when we were really small, we were only 3 or 4 people with professional engineering service consultancy. We tried to work out what was going on within our market, just taking the time to be strategic. In this case, here's an example of the New Zealand upgrade program. So it's just taken it there. And you can see where the purple dots are is when design comes to market, and C is when the construction activities. So all of a sudden we can see that for all these immediate opportunities, if we've had no relationship with New Zealand Transport Agency, we're unlikely to get them. So if we want to, we'd be better to focus our attention on those things that are coming up in the later part. In fact, we can do it two ways. We can either go to New Zealand Transport Agency if we're going to have a relationship with one of the primes, maybe the subs. So you see quite quickly where you can build that picture up. And actually, what's really interesting, if you talk to your local councils or some of your agencies you work with, they have this information available. It should be readily available. So there's no reason why you can't ask your local council for this information or find it. So let's just take an example. I would love to have a problem where we've got a Māori business going to pitch for NZTA Melling interchange for 258 million. That's my dream. That's my dream. Okay, and I know it's Kahurangi's dream as well. So let's just say we're going to focus on this opportunity. So we know, okay, this has moved on a little bit, but actually we know that the construction contract's coming out at the back end of Q4 in 2021, so December, there or thereabouts. So we have this opportunity, what we call our pre-positioning opportunity, to actually go ahead and help build that positive bias with the client. So, or with the prime. So now's the time to start building that relationship. Waiting for the tender to come to market is not the right time to try and jump on building a relationship with the client or building a relationship with the prime. So as I said before, if we find out about something that's too late, then you'll be finding that some other organisation that is organised has already built that relationship up. Okay, and here's some very simple things we can do. You know, as I said, we're a small business, but we start to map organisations against each other. So we know, for example, in New Zealand Transport Agency, that actually we need to have a relationship at the highest possible level. And it's not a very Māori or Pacifica thing. You know, it's taken me a long time to have the confidence to go and have discussions with some of these organisations at a high level. But the point is that you may have this equivalent relationship with your local council. So some of them small regional councils you might find, and it's really easy to get access to the mayor or the CEO. Or for the local branch of the Ministry of Education. So we don't have to take New Zealand Transport Agency as an example. It's just going, actually, you know, I've got a small building business. I've got 20 or 30 guys. I've got 10 guys. I really want to get a relationship with my local council, Far North District Council. I can tell you who's in charge of it. I called David Clant, he's in charge of infrastructure there. Sean Clark's the CEO, both good guys. Both welcome an opportunity to have a corridor with you guys if you're interested in doing business with Far North District Council. I can tell you that same story across lots of different councils around the whole of New Zealand. So I don't think we should be shy in going and having corridor and having a chat with people at a direct level. But can we map our organisation across? Same with, here's one for a contractor. So for example, let's think about maybe, let's look at Downers. Craig West, he's Māori All Black. He's from Tainui, great guy. If you were in the Waikato region and you wanted to talk to Craig West, I'm sure you get on the phone and have a chat to him. Most of these people, just because they have flash titles, are really, really approachable. It's a very Kiwi thing. And, you know, and the great thing with Amotai is that Kahurangi can, in some cases, start to broker that discussion for you or get you connected with the right people within those organisations. I'm putting her on the spot. She'll be right. I'm just jumping through here. One of the things we're talking about is if we're going to understand or get below the waterline, what is that big issue? And you said most of the time it is never technical. It's always things like, could be public relationships. I'm going to build that footpath outside those shops. What are the big things the client's interested in? Not the depth of the the depth of the concrete or the way you've sited the mesh or whatever. It'll all be around actually how do we keep that shop open for that period of time. One of the things we've been doing a lot of work with Māori businesses, putting things called pitch packs together. So how do we articulate value? How do we show things? And I'll send this through to you. You can share this. You can see kind of how it unfolds. But it's a good way of defining the value you add. And what we do is really challenge you to start to think about what are your clients' issues? What are your concerns? I can tell you in this market at the moment, the clients' biggest issues are one is around resourcing projects. So if you've got good people on the ground that are competent and capable, that resolves an issue straight away, because if we can get competent people on the ground, then they can deliver their capital works budgets. That's their number one issue. What's the other one issue? It's around public relations. So anything to do, for example, with the school, is how do we mitigate the interface between the pupils and the general operation of that school, such that we're not disrupting the education, especially in the COVID-19 world. So you can see quite clearly that, again, and these are not technical issues, and you're probably going to me, well, this is stuff we do already. All good. Cool. So pitch back's a way of thinking about things. Yeah, I suppose what we're really pointing out here is that how do we create a positive bias, and what's some really practical things we can do? Obviously, we can put a pitch back together. But one of the great things you can do is that clients really want to meet your team. You know, Sean Clark and David Clamp, who are at Far North District Council, they won't mind me talking about it, are interested about what you're doing. So the best thing you can do is invite them to your site. Come and have a look at the work we're doing. Because what we're in is we're in the outsourced success game. We actually are providing people to deliver someone else's success so they can go away and say, look what I've done. So one of the greatest things we can do is, particularly for small businesses, invite other organizations to come and have a look at the way we work. Come and meet my people. So when they're looking at outsourced success, they go, actually, I know those guys. I know that business. And I know the people. I've met them on the ground. I've seen them operate. I've seen how they did my site induction when I walked on there. I've seen their paperwork. I've got confidence in their ability to deliver. The other thing we can do is how can we get them to meet our customers? So there's some very simple things we can do as organizations to try and create that positive bias. You know, below the waterline, get rid of all that stuff. So when you put that proposal forward to the client, they go, actually, we know, and we trust you guys. Talked a little bit about that. Hey, just some simple things to think about. So we all get stuck in the mahi, you know, we all focus running around like hair on fire. But how do we take time out of our business to be really strategic around what we're doing? And, you know, I'm a big fan of business coaching. And but one of the things I think we don't do enough is just to take time to look at what work we've got coming up. So typical small business mentality is you work really hard, deliver the projects, get to the end of it, a couple of weeks out and go, oh man, what are we going to do next? So how do we create some more structure and discipline around it? So there's things like, why don't we just get together a 1 hour a week and talk about sales? And now it could be a mum and dad business, it could be, the husband and wife getting together just to think about what's going on after the immediate job that we've got going on. Making time for yourself to actually go out and meet some customers. So one of the things I'm a real big advocate of is how do we create space in our diary? So I might just say, like, actually on Thursday afternoons between 2 and 4, I'm just going to go visit some customers. Go and have a chat. Go and find out what's going on. You know, if I'm connected at a high level, I'm talking to the, go and catch up with coffee with David Clampett at Far North District Council. You know, those types of discussions, go and talk to his equivalent of whangare, or kaipara, whatever, just go and have a chat. It's about how we chill. Because you can be rest assured, here's the key metric here. The more time you talk to somebody, the more opportunity you have of getting work. The more time you talk to them, the more opportunity you have to get negotiated work. The more time they see what you do out of the, out on site, the opportunity is to get higher margin work as well. So these are things to think about. One of the things I don't think we do very well is how do we manage our pipeline? So pipeline is what activities have we got going on? So this is a very simple tool called Pipe Drive. So each of these here is an opportunity. So we could have Ministry of Education, I don't know, Kaikoui School upgrade. Far North District Council could be the netball courts in Kiriki, pipeline at Whangarei. So these are all the things that are going on. So we keep track, we monitor them, we put some discipline around it. So these tools are really simple to set up and easy to use. What it does is it puts a time and point there, and it allows us to understand actually what opportunities are coming up and how we're managing them. And it goes back to that weekly meeting or that monthly meeting we're having to try and keep on track of it. Most of these are pretty simple to set up and work, but actually it's like what we do with Xero now. It's the same sort of discipline around how we do Xero if you use a workflow max for your job management system. All right, it's just a way of working out. Actually, off Pipe Drive, we actually start to do forecast revenue as well. So we know the demand we have for our team. We can start to work out actually what sort of work do we need in our pipeline in order to feed the team. Because what it does is it builds up statistics over a period of time that allow us to go, actually, what is our percentage chance of winning that opportunity if it's in our pipeline with that contract? What is the time it takes for us to convert a deal from initial discussion through to actually getting a building contract in place? All right, just going to talk really quickly around some trends in construction, and I borrowed this off a friend of mine who's doing some good work in the space. But look, here's some disturbing statistics. 57 trillion Australians needed by 2030. So this is not going away. We're in a winning business here. 98% of mega projects become delayed or over budget. Large projects take 20% longer to finish and schedule are 80% over budget. Construction is among the less digitized. I can keep going on and on. But each of these challenges actually presents a real opportunity. And I'll talk a little bit about what that means. So if we look at that little yellow line there, that's the net improvement in productivity for construction over the last, oh goodness me, is that 60 years. So we've had a 1% net increase in productivity and construction activity. So we're still doing stuff the way we used to in the 1940s in essence. If you look here, this is retail and this is agriculture. So what we're seeing is actually within construction in particular is we are the poorest productivity improvers by a long shot. But what it means is there's really good opportunity for us to improve things. And there's some great research done by McKinsey's. If you're not readers, this is a really good document to read. And it highlights some real opportunities, things around things like building capability, like investing in our staff, technology, things like how do we collaborate better? So use things like MS Teams, BIM, so if you're familiar with BIM, building information management, things like that. Use of aerial vehicles to do, UAVs to do things like survey or earthworks and using GPS within our vehicles. There's no silver bullet here, but there's heaps of opportunity to make iterative changes within your business. So I think what I'm challenging you guys to do is really start to look within your business, or if you're not a construction sector, actually know what opportunities are there for us. And we're seeing this, we briefed New Zealand NZTE, Trade and Enterprise, on what the opportunities are for New Zealand business, and this is what we saw. Asset management, so how do we go about understanding our assets and putting in maintenance regimes and asset planning? Procurement models, this is something we're working on. How do we create opportunities to move away from lowest price conforming to be more collaborative? Technology and data, predictive modeling, design services. I think one of the things I think is a real opportunity, particularly for Māori, in environmental and water. And I'm trying to advocate very hard with some of the senior leaders within our sector that Māori should be considered the cultural professional services provider for some of these contracts. And I think if we look at some of the delays, particularly for some of the larger projects that have gone on, if we look at transmission gully and so forth like that, I think if we'd had better iwi governance and better involvement, we could have actually delivered that project a little bit more efficiently. But it's probably the case study right across our portfolio of projects. Social and sustainable outcomes. How do we drive businesses to create jobs? So some of the stuff we're doing is world leading in terms of the way we're thinking and trying to invest. Bidding and tender services, this is what we do. All right. So big breath, that's me, Kahurangi. Look, what I'll do with this slide deck, I'll send a link. We'll upload it onto our LinkedIn page, and you can link through. But if you need to get hold of me, I'm really crap at email. Just call me, or reach out, follow us on LinkedIn. We'd love you guys to follow us on LinkedIn. We've got a goal around trying to get 3,000 followers by April. But what I'll do is I'll upload this onto LinkedIn, our company profile. But if you need to get a copy of this, I'll make Kahurangi available as well, so she can see.
Yeah, awesome.
We might have some time for questions.
Yeah, and we've had a couple of questions come through, but I'm really curious about how you think social procurement and supply diversity Amotai impacting some of the kind of government procurement space, because I think it's really important for our businesses to think about how they pre-position themselves for those opportunities as well.
Look, I suppose for use, kind order is a really good example. So I think my experience, and I've been working in the sector for some 20 years now, Māori business wasn't a thing in construction. What we're seeing, traditionally had been a corporatization of our construction sector within government. So that favoured the larger corporate entities and precluded not just Māori business, but small business in general. And I'm saying that very generally, but it was pretty much like that. But we're seeing now, I think, is a real emphasis around the importance of Māori business, but actually the more importance around using smaller business and delivery contracts. So what we're seeing now, probably more so than ever, is client organisations specifically asking, what Māori businesses are you engaging to deliver this contract?
Yes.
What are you delivering at a local level? What jobs have been generated from that? And actually, client organisations have been quite prepared and interested in understanding how they pay for that as well. So, for example, traditionally, training was one of those things that was kind of expected, but it was an industry cost, which meant that people didn't invest in it. And so we're seeing now that client organisations being more clear around willing to pay for it and report against it. Does that help?
Yeah. I'm just thinking, like, where we obviously work with a lot of the companies that you put up on screen, you know, the Kahurangi Orders of the world and the Fulton Hogans and Down and Hawkins and all of that. And we've started to see, you know, that there's been weighting put on tenders towards supplier diversity and making sure that Māori and Pacifica businesses are engaged in the project. And so I was just curious as to your thoughts of how we kind of maximise those opportunities.
So one of the things I think is the relationship you're going to have with those primes, and you know there's actually very few real primes around. So, and they've got people within those organisations of which you can connect them to that can help them in that journey of becoming subcontractors for some of those primes. So yeah, we're seeing a heavy emphasis. I think, you know, if we use KO as an example, you know, with that real progressive thinking, there even a willingness now to look at for certain packages of work for Māori business to lead those packages. So the relationship you've got with those organisations is starting to bear fruit. So hopefully we'll see some larger packages of work awarded directly to Māori business.
Yeah, that's the goal. It's coming up. And we're starting to see a whole lot more closed kind of invitations, the closed tenders that you talked about. You know, and even some of our government agencies and local councils wanting to do closed tenders to Amotai businesses so that they know a Māori or Pacifica business is going to win. Kind of gives them that advantage, but we need businesses that can understand the procurement process and put in a compliant bid.
Awesome.
I'm curious on your views of panels as well.
Yeah, so panels are like, if you can imagine an analogy of attacking a castle with an outer wall. So what a panel is essentially gives you access to the inner keep, but you've still got to attack the inner keep. Still got to build a relationship with the organisations that are going to do the buying. Just because you're on a panel doesn't mean that work will come your way. Again, people have got to be emotionally invested in you as an organisation and you as an individual. So all the panel does is just provide you an opportunity to sort of short circuit the procurement process a little bit. But you continue to drive that relationship. If I give you an example, lots of all the government panels at the moment, there's an FM panel and the ones I talked about with NZTA and KO. But unless you're managing the relationship with that organisation, you're out there actually actively hunting for work and promoting yourself. They're unlikely to get work. So you can't be passive on a panel. No way.
Yeah. Well, so it's all really about relationships, repositioning.
So we're really in the outsource success game, and for anyone who's in the building trade will know that if you're a builder, you know the way you get your next build is generally through recommendation of the person that used you last. Because if you think about a renovation to your house or to a new build, it's a very emotive, stressful thing to go through. So people really rely on the recommendation of someone previously. So that's no different from a government buyer. In fact, it's probably more acute within the government buyer. So bound by rules, they're so bound by other constraints that are not technical.
Awesome. Well, hey, I can see now that we're close to 1 o'clock. So I just want to acknowledge you. Want to thank you for your time and thank you for offering, you know, to your contact details as well to all of our attendees that have jumped on today. I also want to acknowledge Te Puni Kōkiri in the Northland and Missy from Potama Trust who have all come together to try and support our businesses in the North, but all across the country of how we can kind of upskill everyone and keep everyone in the loop with space, which you're so knowledgeable on, Warner. So thank you again for your time today. And
such an important discussion. Look, it's so exciting. It really is.
Yeah.
These are all good problems.
Yes, yeah, and it's it's a great time to, you know, Māori and Pacifica business from our perspective. It's awesome to be able to work with you again, and I'm sure we'll continue to do more and more work together as we as many businesses as we can across the Motu. So yeah, thank you, Warner, and thank you to everyone that's joined in. This has been recorded, so we'll flick it out to everyone that wants to rewatch, but also those that weren't able to make it. So, kia ora everyone, and we'll sign off. Yeah, ka kite.
Ka kite.